Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, the largest country on the Asian subcontinent was still infected with polio. 2 years ago, half of the children being paralyzed by polio worldwide lived in this one country. 2 years ago, skeptics and cynics around the world said this country proves polio can't be eradicated. Ladies and gentlemen, today, India is polio-free. Today, Rotary's vision of a polio-free world is much, much closer to a reality. Today, on the 8th of May, 2012, we have the lowest number of polio-infected countries and the lowest number of polio-paralyzed children in history. There was no silver bullet that finally killed off the seemingly unstoppable polio virus in India. There were technical innovations, like this new bivalent polio vaccine. There were special strategies to reach children who had been repeatedly missed during polio campaigns. And there was strong national leadership, including from the Minister of Health himself. These were all important, but most importantly, there were Rotarians. Rotarians who generously donated money to ensure every child in India could be vaccinated and every polio virus could be detected. Rotarians who willingly gave their time to convince national and local leaders that every child had to be vaccinated. Rotarians who consistently found solutions to the inevitable day-to-day emergencies that continually arose in this battle. Rotarians who passionately monitored the program at all levels to keep the rest of us on our toes. A polio-free India is a magnificent achievement, and it is Rotary's achievement. On the 23rd of February, I presented the Government of India with a letter announcing that for the first time in history, India was being removed from WHO's list of countries with polio. And when the Prime Minister of India stood up a few minutes later to acknowledge this magnificent achievement, he didn't say, "Thank you, WHO," or "Thank you, UNICEF," or "Thank you, Bill Gates," or "Thank you, CDC." He said, "Thank you, Rotary." With this achievement, ladies and gentlemen, the world passed perhaps the most important milestone ever on the very long road to polio eradication. Because with this announcement that India is now polio-free, there is finally indisputable, unequivocal proof that Rotary is right. Polio can be eradicated everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, with India coming polio-free, there are now no technical or biological barriers to completing polio eradication. We've crossed the Rubicon. There are only political and societal barriers at this point. And these are barriers that your organization, that Rotary, is uniquely positioned to address. Over the past 24 years of our partnership, to reach every child everywhere in the world with the oral polio vaccine, I've come to know what Rotary is very, very good at. Rotary has proven again and again that its 1.2 million Rotarians in 33,000 Rotary clubs in 170 countries around the world are much better than us at some things. You're much better than us, your partners, when it comes to the political and the societal challenge. You are better than the World Health Organization. You're better than UNICEF. You're better than the US Centers for Disease Control. And don't tell him I said this, but you're also better than Mr. Bill Gates at some of these things. Rotarians, you are better at convincing political leaders to hold local authorities and vaccinators accountable. You are better at convincing parents of the importance of getting their children vaccinated. You are better at convincing donor governments of the value in investing in polio eradication. Your voice, Rotary's voice, is the most powerful weapon we have in the war against polio. And you have a lot of good news to put your voice behind. In addition to India, last year, every country which had been reinfected with polio, except Chad, also stopped their infection and their polio cases. Last year, the new bivalent polio vaccine that we've been using also brought a second polio virus, the type 3 polio virus, to the verge of extinction. As you put Rotary's voice behind the final battle to finish off polio, be assured that the world is completely with you in this war. Tomorrow, as Chairman Bill said, I will get back on a plane and fly back to Geneva to begin preparing for an unprecedented push to finish this war against polio. In 1 week, 194 ministers of health from all over the world will be gathering in Geneva to declare that completing your dream, Rotary's dream of a polio-free world, must now be an emergency for global public health. Completing polio eradication is now an emergency because as India became polio-free, there was an unexpected and dangerous upsurge in paralyzed children in northern Nigeria, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan late last year. Completing polio eradication is now an emergency because recent outbreaks on 3 continents highlighted the increasingly dangerous consequences of failure. In China, in Congo, and in Tajikistan, explosive outbreaks took on a sinister new dimension, paralyzing not just children, but also adults. And up to 50% of those adults died. Completing polio eradication is now an emergency because the world fully understands the consequences of failure. In addition to the more than 250,000 children who would again be paralyzed by this virus every single year, the world understands these horrific consequences, and the world understands that these are unacceptable. Polio is a deadly, devastating disease. Eradication must be completed so that it can never return. Rotarians, you have convinced the world's health ministers now that the completion of polio must be declared an emergency for global public health. You, Rotarians, have convinced the world that if any child is permanently paralyzed by polio, it is now a global emergency. If any child is not reached with the oral polio vaccine, it is now an emergency. If the world cannot overcome the barriers to reaching every child everywhere with the very basics of healthcare, it is now an emergency. And in this emergency, we must be faster, we must be more focused, and we must all, every one of us, be fully accountable. We must be faster in finding the children who are repeatedly missed with our new polio vaccines. We must be faster in finding out why we miss these children and faster in finding a way to ensure they are never missed again. We must be more focused in applying ourselves to the greatest geographic and operational challenges where the virus now clings on in northern Nigeria and in the border areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan. We must be fully accountable from each head of state and the head of each one of our partner agencies to each vaccinator in the field. We must all play our role to finish the job in these last infected areas. Ladies and gentlemen, your core partners, WHO, my organization, UNICEF, and the US Centers for Disease Control are all going into emergency mode. The Director General of WHO and the Director of CDC have moved polio into our emergency operations centers to ensure we are faster, more focused, and fully accountable to our leadership. WHO and UNICEF have already begun deploying a huge additional surge of assistance, eventually totaling more than 6,000 additional people into the infected areas of Nigeria and Pakistan. And the Executive Director of UNICEF is himself leading a high-level polio security task force to scale up new solutions for operating in insecure areas. Most importantly, though, Nigeria and Pakistan are changing their game as well. In both of these countries, the head of state has publicly pledged to lead a new, renewed emergency effort to stop the remaining poliovirus transmission. In both countries, the head of government has appointed and empowered a national polio leader, answering directly to the head of government themselves to run their polio emergency effort. And in both countries, the head of government has established a national task force to hold every local leader directly accountable for the quality of emergency eradication activities in their jurisdictions. And in Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, the President has gone even further. The President of Nigeria has just pledged to provide US $30 million of domestic funding to the program every year until polio is finished. Rotarians, you have set this extraordinary emergency effort in motion. You are changing the world. You are making the world a better place for children today, tomorrow, and, if you rise to this last challenge, forever. Your foundation has already reaffirmed that Polio Plus is your most urgent priority. Now your foundation and the world is counting on every Rotarian to play an active role in bringing this great eradication effort, this great effort in social justice, to a successful conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful young girl is Rukhsar Khatun. On the 13th of January 2011, she was the last child to be paralyzed by polio in India. She is the last child paralyzed by polio in India because Rotarians stood up and said, "Enough, polio stops here." Rotary's voice stopped polio in India. To stop polio everywhere, we are taking the many, many lessons that we learned from India and rapidly applying them in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan. But we need every Rotarian to stand up and say, "Enough. Polio stops here." Nobody stood. Rotary, your voice is essential for stopping polio in the rest of the world. Rotary's voice is essential for advocating and educating donor governments that eradication will quickly reap a financial benefit of at least $50 billion. Rotarians rose to the Rotary challenge and raised an incredible US $200 million in additional financing in record time to help finish polio. Rotarians must now challenge donor countries to do the same thing. Rotarians must write to their leaders everywhere, repeatedly and ceaselessly, to make the case for financing polio eradication. We can't afford to be cutting corners in an emergency. But in March of this year, polio campaigns were canceled in nearly 24 polio-free countries because donor governments have not yet caught up with the generosity of Rotarians. Reaching every last child with something as simple as a polio vaccine is still expensive. In the Congo, roads collapse and our vehicles have to be dug out so that our teams can carry on. In Afghanistan and elsewhere, the costs of security are soaring as we try to keep our teams safe. Rotarians, make the case for full financing of eradication. Write to your governments, meet with your ministers of international assistance. Make sure your government knows how generous you, Rotarians, have been and challenge them to match you. Rotary's voice is absolutely essential to ensure every child is vaccinated in the last infected countries. In Nigeria, and in Pakistan, in Afghanistan and in Chad, and in any country that becomes reinfected. In every polio-infected country, every Rotarian can make the difference. Local Rotarians can monitor the quality of polio campaigns better than anyone. Local Rotarians can report on gaps in implementation better than anyone else. And local Rotarians can cajole national and local leaders into holding their vaccination teams accountable for reaching every child. Ladies and gentlemen, every Rotarian in every polio-infected country could now make the difference between failure and a victory for children that lives on in perpetuity. Rotary's voice is also essential within Rotary itself. Indian Rotarians enjoyed huge solidarity with Rotarians worldwide as they led the charge to complete eradication in that country. Rotarians worldwide were generous with their moral support and their encouragement. And this support, this encouragement, was absolutely essential for Indian Rotarians. It sustained and motivated them through the dark days when the challenges of reaching every child with the polio vaccine looked overwhelming. There are remarkable, inspiring Rotarians at work in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan. Support them in this emergency. Think hard how your club, wherever you are in the world, can reach out to every Rotarian in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and even in Afghanistan to help. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, Rotary recognized India as the greatest challenge to global polio eradication, and Rotarians made Polio Plus in India an organization-wide emergency. Today, India is polio-free, and Rukhsar Khatoon is your proof that polio can be eradicated everywhere. Today, Rotary's vision of a polio-free world is much, much closer to reality. The world is declaring the completion of polio eradication in these last few countries an emergency for global public health because the world believes in your vision. The world is declaring polio eradication an emergency because we believe in your dream of a polio-free world. Now, your energy, your advocacy, and your generosity must be the energy that drives this emergency. Rotarians, a polio-free tomorrow is this close now. Rotarians, seize this opportunity, change history forever, and end polio now. Thank you.